Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. Today, we're going to do another market update. We're going to start with actually a new tool that kind of came across my desk. Very interesting tool. So, what it does, but then also what are kind of like the implications of it, I guess you could say. And I compare it to this new tool, which is not AI, to some of the new AI flashiness that we're seeing out there. Doing that comparison. But also, I think it's a tool that not everybody will use. I think honestly, maybe 10% of brokers will be able to incorporate this into their day to day. And what that means for the service provider, but also the brokers out there. Which part do you want to be in, the 90% or the 10%? And how do you pick those? From there, we talk a little bit about what's going on in the market, including the new inflation print, which was quite low, what that means. And then finally, we wrap up with some upcoming exciting industry events that I can't wait to see you at, how to really approach those and get the most from those events. Okay, we'll see you in the episode. Truth maybe is that every time you put a document in an email, that is the most vulnerable place. Hello, everyone. Great to have you back for another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. For today's episode, I actually wanted to kick things off, get started with a new tool that came across my desk, my proverbial desk, my digital desk, of course, being my inbox. And what that was from Mortgage Logic News, of course, which is Rob McClister's newsletter. There's a free version and a paid version. I'm on the free version. I should probably upgrade to the paid, but even for us freebies like me, this came across. And what it was is specifically what he calls an amortization simulator. I think it does a lot of different things, but in this latest version, what came across, which I thought was really cool, was he came out with a term calculator. So, what is meant by this, or what does this term calculator do? Well, it's pretty cool and it seems pretty simple, but pretty powerful, where basically it takes a couple assumptions to start. So, it actually takes in the prevailing rates right now across kind of the board of all the different products and different terms, variable rates, 3-year fixed, 5-year fixed, a whole bunch of them, 1-year fixed. And then it also looks at today's implied outlook, right? So what at least the betting markets are saying, well, this will be what the Bank of Canada is going to have as the overnight rate over the next 5 years. I think he's looking at 5 years. And what are people betting? And then based on that and other things, what are the bond markets betting that the 5-year fixed or 3-year fixed or all these different fixed variable rates are going to be over that same time period? And basically it takes that all in, does a big calculation and says, hey, comparing these different products, what comes out on top. So I'll do a quick screen share and I'll describe it to you. So yeah, what you can see here is exactly as I was kind of describing. It's with the Mortgage Logic News 3.0. So it seems like there's been a couple of iterations before, which I'm less familiar with, but here we are. And then exactly what I described is this, where it basically just takes the different terms. So you have your VRM 1 year and then a 5-year fixed, 1 years, 1 year, then variable 2 years, and variable 3 years, and variable, and looks at all the different ones and just basically says, what's the cheapest? And I mean, the answer here you can see is just the variable rate mortgage, which is very interesting. I think we should chat about that in just a second. So this is pretty cool. And then the other thing with this is then it kind of does the head-to-head comparison, right? Where it does that math for you to say, okay, well, if I'm comparing the variable rate mortgage versus the 5-year fixed, I see maybe there's about, 9,000 difference there. It actually does that for you, variable versus 5-year, and you can see exactly it's 9,398. So this is a cool tool. From what I can tell about it, it's actually just a Excel spreadsheet, which honestly can go really, really far to do a lot of really impressive things. So what I'm imagining, and again, maybe I should just, pony up is the word I was looking for, and just get the paid version so I could see it, but haven't done that yet. But it's just an Excel spreadsheet. But you can get a lot done with an Excel spreadsheet. I think it's so interesting. And, in kind of all this commentary, I won't read it here, that basically, hey, it's a pretty powerful tool when you're talking to a client, right? And I think it is, right? To be able to say, hey, with that level of precision, I should say, over the next 5 years, you're really debating these two different things, but there's about a $10,000 difference if you're looking at these two options. And so even if you bake in a little bit of uncertainty, you're probably going to come out on top because, that's a pretty big number, $10,000. Yeah, so I think that's, first of all, really interesting tool. If anyone out there has actually started using it, I'd love to hear your feedback. I think anybody who's having these types of conversations with their client who are really comparing two different term types or just simply two different terms, something like this, I think it's worth every penny. I mean, I think when I look at it, let's do this download here. And I go, you need to upgrade your account. It's like $100 a month or $1,000 on the year. And it's like, if you get one deal out of this, it's going to be completely worth it, right? I mean, what's the value of one deal? It's almost always, there's very some rare scenarios where you might make less than $1,000 a deal, but 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, you're making over that amount. So, this is an ROI positive investment for any. So I think it's a really interesting tool. And I think that, there's actually a couple points of commentary, though, that I really want to drive home about this. And the first is what I just talked about, which is okay, this is an ROI, a return on investment positive activity, almost for sure. If you're using it consistently, I could very easily see, depending, I guess, on your volume, but very easily see how this could generate you at least one new deal in a year, probably many more. But despite that, besides being a cool tool that really does that and definitely is positive for you, call it 90% of brokers will use this, right? I think that those 90% are just kind of focused on the next deal, waiting for that phone to ring, really working on collecting some docs to get the deal approved, the one that they're working on. And that's okay. I think that's perfectly fine. And, for those folks who are doing it, the idea of, another subscription to pay, another login to keep track of, it's just at this point getting a little bit exhausting. I can keep things simpler. I can just focus on that. And so I think that's just the nature of the market. And the reason I bring this up is because, there's actually a lot of, I think, startups out there who are trying to do something like this calculator tool, right? Which is, hey, for my own book of business, I built this really cool Excel spreadsheet, or I don't know what else it might have, maybe even like an app that I have that I use for myself. And I think it could be really useful for every single broker in Canada. And that's probably true based on, the type of, is it similar to this based on that analysis that we just did? But that's just not the market, right? I think that anybody out there who's listening that's maybe thinking of building an app or has that cool spreadsheet and saying, hey, I think I could bring this to market and do something really cool. I think that's, just the reality of the market is that there's that 90-10, maybe call it 80-20 if we're being generous. And the 20% are going to eat it up and love it, and 80% aren't. And maybe that's okay, right? And I think it's just, as a service provider, if you think about doing that, and I think Rob, when I look at this, definitely in that camp, he's not betting the house on this calculator tool. You understand it's probably is just going to go to that 10 to 20%, and that's okay for him. And so I think for a service provider, you just got to think of it that way. And then for a mortgage broker, for every agent and broker out there who's listening to this, again, it's the same question to say, okay, do I want to be in the 80 or do I want to be in the 20%? And there's not a right or a wrong answer. But hey, if you do want to be in that 20%, if you do want to be in that group, people are really focused on growth of their business, you need to start looking at tools like this. It's just more and more you need to. And yes, there's going to be complexity with it. Yes, it's going to be another login. Yes, it's going to be another thing that you're going to have to keep track of. But that's business. And if you're not going to do it, the next person will, right? So it's just about that mindset and the type of broker you want to be. The other kind of quick note I'll make about this is that, even despite this, I think this can make a real impact for any broker listening today. You could download it today, you could close a deal tomorrow because of it. It's so immediate, so tangible. It addresses a real problem, but no one's really talking about this as much. It's just something that kind of came across my desk. And I contrast that, our favorite word of the month, call it the year AI, which everybody's talking about. You can't escape it, but I haven't seen a lot of that tangibility when it comes to different AI tools. Yes, it can help you summarize an email. Yes, it can summarize the deal notes for you when you submit to lender, but is it really helping you get that next deal? I don't know. So I just think it's an interesting point to make, not a really specific takeaway, but interesting to see how, as I guess humans, I'll say, we're so attracted to those shiny objects, but sometimes the boring Excel spreadsheet is way more impactful. So be very diligent, I guess, in terms of the ROI. I talked about at the beginning, return on investment of the different things that you're looking at, right? You can't really take to the bank some flashiness that AI can provide, but you can take to the bank, the results that you're going to get from something like this. So let's switch gears. I'm doing this on October 16th. So the big news right now is the latest inflation print. I think it was down to 1.6, which is pretty low. And I think it's true, Where if you take out shelter, so shelter includes rent and mortgage payments, we're actually negative. We're actually in what you would call deflation. Prices are coming down. Now, I think prices coming down are actually a good thing. A lot of people are freaking out, but I think lower prices are good, just if you have the quantity to match those lower prices. But without going down that economic rabbit hole, I think that with this, what it means is a higher likelihood, of Bank of Canada making those cuts quicker and faster. I mean, that's the short answer of it. And of course, that's good news for mortgage brokers. I think, of course, lower rates is going to mean more activity. It's great for borrowers too. But the other interesting thing too with this is with that, and if I go back to in the actual amortization simulator that we were just talking about, because of these rapid drops in that overnight rate, actually looks like variable rate is back on top where it was 5-10 years ago as the least interest paid over a 5-year period. And, I think that's really interesting. But also, I think what's interesting, I saw Ron Butler, who's a friend, talk about this, which is, a lot of people are scarred by that variable rate. A lot of people took out the variable rate in 2021, 2022, and then overnight rate went up by 500 basis points or whatever it was. And those people really were in a tough way with it and really got kind of, I guess, burned by it. And so I think there's this negative connotation out there about variable rates. And I think it's interesting. I actually think this is an opportunity, a really good opportunity for mortgage brokers out there. Instead of just being about the transaction, I always say go from being a transaction to a trusted advisor. And what a trusted advisor can do at this time is provide that education and say, hey, push through that emotional bias that you might have. I understand that emotional bias, but it is just exactly what that is. And the numbers don't lie. And what the numbers say is, yes, we should actually be considering those variable rates again. And to take it one step further, if your clients don't believe you, tools like the amortization builder or the Canadian mortgage app, who does very similar type of calculations, can be a great way to show it. So use those tools. A great way to prove that you're trustworthy is to let the numbers do the talking, let the simulations do the talking, right? And it shows that you're a tech savvy person. That also builds trust, I think, in today's day and age. So the variable rate is back. People aren't going to believe you, but this is a great opportunity to build that trust. And if you're having a tough time doing it, tools like this and the Canadian mortgage app can really help. Okay, to wrap things up, when this releases, which will be on the 25th, the National Mortgage Conference will be in 2 days. I think it starts on the 27th, goes to the 29th. I'm excited for it. It's the best event of the year for sure in the industry. Everyone goes. Always a very fun time. Meet a ton of people. Come to our booth. We have a booth. I'd love to see you. Maybe take a picture together. All those sorts of fun things. But with this conference, we talked about this when I say we, few fellow panelists and I, when we went to the Canadian Mortgage Summit. So it was Dong Lee, Jared Stanley, it was Derek Mathewson from Fiologics, Jesse Abrams from HomeWise, he's the moderator. We had a panel at the Canadian Mortgage Summit. So similar type event, 1-day event versus a 3-day event. And the message was, and I want to reiterate the message, is you go to one of these conferences, you're going to get overloaded with tips. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's going to be so much information flying at you when it comes to technology. You're going to hear the word AI maybe about 10,000 times. And you're going to get really excited. And I think rightfully so. It's those shiny objects we talked about earlier. And don't ignore them. The trick, of course, always is to find the signal from the noise. I think I've said that phrase a couple times now, but you get a lot of noise. There's going to be a lot of stuff there. But the trick is finding that signal, the thing that you think actually will make an impact in your business. And the challenge, or my tip when I was on that panel, and the tip I'll say now is, you're going to get 100 things. Come home and promise yourself you're going to do one. There's going to be 100 things on the list. Order that list and just look at the top. And don't even look at numbers 2 through 100, all 99 of those. Get those out of your mind. Just focus on one and say to yourself, I'm going to implement this before the end of the year, before December 31st, 2024. So on Jan 1 next year, I'm starting off right in an improved business state. I'm going to take this one thing, and I'm going to implement it for my business. And that's it. And I promise you 2 things will happen. Of course, you're going to get those benefits from doing that, but you're also going to realize how easy it is to do these types of things and kind of get that confidence. If you try to do all 100 at once, you're going to end up doing none of those. So if you go to the conference and you come home with one takeaway and you do it, I'd love to hear about it. But that is my tip, because otherwise you will just be drowning in all the tips because it's just information overload. It's a lot of fun, but that's always the trick with it. And it's going to be personal to you. You can't look at the person next to you and say, well, what's your number? What's on your list? It's a personal decision. So make that personal decision. And again, I'd love to hear it if you end up doing that. So that wraps up today's episode. A couple interesting things there. If you like this, please, all I ask is you share with just one friend. That's how we grow, just one listener at a time. We'll see you next week.